If this heavyset woman is the best driver you could find, cancel the convoy now, because I would rather walk into a gunfight than die behind a steering wheel crushed by someone who cannot even fit the part, Luca Romano said, in a voice low, enough to sound private and cruel enough for every bodyguard in the underground garage to hear. Grace Bell kept one hand on the armored sedan's open door and the other on the keys, her face calm beneath the fluorescent lights. Before sunrise, that same woman would throw herself across him when a rifle cracked through the windshield, taking the bullet meant for his heart. Some men need loyalty, explained. Luca learned it bleeding beside his driver. Grace Bell accepted the Romano job because the money could save her mother's failing house, but the first night placed her inside a war she was never supposed to survive. Luca Romano, New York's coldest mafia boss, saw her soft, round figure and mistook her body for weakness before she had even started the engine. What nobody in his garage knew was that Grace had once trained federal marshals in evasive driving after growing up beside a father who drove mob convoys for 20 years. Her first secret was buried under an old family name, a dead chauffeur's badge, and a promise never to drive powerful men into darkness again. The underground garage beneath the Aurelia Club smelled of gasoline, rainwater, leather, and money polished until it stopped looking dirty. Black sedans lined the concrete like sleeping predators, each one armored-tinted and guarded by men with earpieces and dead eyes. Grace Bell stood beside the lead car in a charcoal driving coat that skimmed the fullness. She carried her dark curls pinned back her wide hips, steady her gloved fingers resting lightly on the roof. She was not slim, not decorative, not the kind of woman the Romano family usually placed behind a wheel for optics. She had lush, generous curves, a calm mouth, and shoulders that looked built for weather. She carried her size with quiet confidence, because Rhodes did not care about dress size. Rhodes cared about reaction time angles, torque traction, and whether a driver could feel danger through tires before a passenger noticed anything was wrong. Grace knew engines by sound and fear by silence. She had spent her teenage years in chop shops and legal garages, learning from her father Michael Bell, the legendary driver who could reverse a limousine through a loading dock faster than most men could pull a gun. Later, after his death, she had gone straight earning certifications, teaching protective driving and driving emergency transports through storms. Her body remembered weight transfer, blind corners, pressure braking, and the tiny shift in a passenger's breathing before panic took command. Yet men still saw her, and thought soft meant slow. That was why Luca Romano's insult should not have surprised her. It did anyway. He emerged from the private elevator in a masterfully tailored midnight suit. Black hair brushed back from a face sharp enough to cut glass, his jawline carved from stone, and his eyes dark with predatory calm. Conversations died around him. The guards straightened. Even the rain hissing down the ramp seemed to lower its voice. Luca moved like a man who owned every door before walking through it. His consigliere, Matteo Vale, followed with a tablet and a worried frown. "The old route is compromised," Matteo murmured. "The replacement driver is ready." Luca's eyes landed on Grace, then traveled over her body with cool disbelief. "That is the replacement?" Luca asked, and the garage went still. Grace heard the faint snort from Rafe, the senior bodyguard who had wanted his cousin behind the wheel. She heard someone shift near the weapons case. She heard the humiliation arrive before the words finished forming. Matteo cleared his throat. "She has the highest defensive driving score in the private registry." Luca did not look impressed. "Scores are paper. Bullets are real." His gaze dropped toward Grace's hips. Not with desire, but with dismissal. Can she even move fast enough if the car flips? Grace kept her hand on the sedan door. "If this car flips, Mr. Romano, your problem will not be my body. It will be gravity." A few guards blinked. Rafe laughed under his breath. Luca's eyes narrowed with the faint interest of an apex predator noticing unexpected teeth. "Do you always answer employers like that?" "Only when they begin the interview by planning my failure." Matteo's mouth twitched before he buried the expression. Luca stepped closer, cedarwood cologne cutting through exhaust. He was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered beneath bespoke fabric, his presence heavy enough to make the concrete feel smaller. You understand this is not a taxi job. Yes. You understand men are waiting outside this club hoping I do not reach my meeting. Yes. And you still think you belong in that seat. Grace opened the driver's door. I know I do. Luca studied her with a silence designed to make people confess. Grace had watched men use silence like that in courtrooms, garages, and hospital waiting rooms. She did not fill it for him. The first hint of something dangerous crossed his face. Not attraction, not respect, but irritation that she refused to shrink. Rafe stepped forward. Boss, with respect, this is insane. The woman looks like she belongs baking pies, not cutting through hostile traffic. Grace's fingers tightened once around the keys. Her father's voice moved through memory. Never fight every insult. Save your hands for the moment that matters. Luca did not defend her. He simply turned toward the car. If she gets me killed, Rafe, you may complain at my funeral. Grace slid behind the wheel before anyone could see the insult land. The armored sedan embraced her like a cockpit, all black leather, reinforced glass, hidden switches, and a steering wheel worn smooth by nervous hands. She adjusted the seat mirrors and brake bias with the practiced calm of someone mapping a battlefield. The lead car would carry Luca in the rear right seat, Matteo beside him, 2 chase vehicles behind, 1 decoy ahead. A simple pattern. Too simple. Grace studied the garage exit camera, the oil sheen near the ramp, the reflection of headlights in the wet concrete. Something felt wrong. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a loose thread in a room pretending to be tailored. Luca entered the back seat with Matteo, still watching her through the mirror. Do not improvise unless ordered. Grace started the engine. It purred heavy and expensive. Then order better. Matteo coughed into his fist. Luca leaned forward slightly, his dangerous rumble turning colder. You have been employed for 6 minutes, and you have been insulting me for 5. The privacy glass began to rise, but Luca stopped it halfway. Drive. Grace smiled without humor. That was always the plan. The convoy rolled out beneath the club's steel gate into a rain-slicked Manhattan night, where neon bled across the asphalt and every passing window held the possibility of a gun barrel. The first 5 blocks were clean. Too clean. Grace hated clean routes after midnight. Traffic should have been uneven near 9th Avenue with delivery trucks, ride shares, drunk pedestrians, and at least 1 angry cyclist. Instead, the lane ahead opened like someone had scraped the city clear. She checked the left mirror. The second chase car lagged half a car length, not enough for amateurs to notice, plenty for a professional ambush to exploit. A motorcycle appeared 2 blocks back, then vanished behind a bus. Luca's voice cut through the cabin. You slowed down because the city got polite. Meaning New York has never been polite in its life. Matteo looked up from his tablet. Grace tapped the brake twice, testing the chase drivers. The first responded well. The second hesitated. Rafe's vehicle. Her jaw tightened. Ahead, a sanitation truck began rolling from a side street too slow for ordinary traffic and too perfectly timed for chance. The motorcycle reappeared in the right mirror. A pedestrian in a grey hoodie stopped under an awning and lifted his phone horizontally. Grace's body went cold and clear. Seat belts, she snapped. Luca's head lifted. What now? Rafe barked through comms. Who the hell does she think she is? The sanitation truck turned broadside, blocking the avenue. Grace yanked the wheel left before Luca finished cursing. The sedan mounted the curb, clipped a newspaper stand, and shot into an alley. The first bullet struck the rear window with a sound like a hammer hitting ice. Spiderweb cracks flashed white across the armored glass. Matteo ducked. Luca reached inside his jacket. Grace did not scream. She accelerated. The alley narrowed between brick walls, slick with rain trash cans exploding against the fenders as the sedan forced through. The motorcycle came behind them, engine screaming. Grace downshifted hard, touched the brake, and let the car slide just enough for the rear bumper to kiss the wall. Sparks burst. The motorcyclist misjudged the angle, clipped a dumpster, and vanished in a metallic crash behind them. Who taught you that? Matteo gasped. Grace kept her eyes forward. a man who hated motorcycles. They burst out of the alley into a service road beneath an elevated track. Grace could have taken the obvious exit toward the highway. She did not. The obvious exit was death wearing a green light. Instead, she cut right toward the river tires, shrieking across wet pavement. Luca's hand gripped the back of her seat, fury and surprise braided in his voice. That was not the route. The route was sold. Silence slammed through the car. Matteo looked at Luca. Luca looked at Grace in the mirror. His face stripped of casual cruelty. Prove it. Before she could answer, headlights flared from a parking structure ahead. A black van rolled down the ramp side door, opening a rifle barrel emerging through darkness. Grace made the only choice left. She threw the sedan sideways between the van and Luca's window, using the car's armored flank as a shield. The rifle cracked. The first round punched into reinforced glass. The second found the narrow gap, where the side panel had already been weakened by the curb impact. Grace saw the angle in the mirror before anyone else did. Luca was leaning forward, exposed between the privacy divider and the doorframe. Her body moved faster than thought. She unbuckled, twisted over the console, and threw herself across the opening as the third shot entered the cabin. Heat tore through her shoulder. Luca's breath stopped against her cheek. The car kept moving because her left hand stayed locked on the wheel. For one impossible second, the world became engine roar rain, and Luca Romano's heartbeat under her palm. Grace felt pain arrive late, bright and distant like a flare seen underwater. She corrected the skid one-handed, drove through a chain-link gate, and slammed the sedan into the shadow of a warehouse loading bay. The chase car behind them finally caught up men pouring out with weapons drawn. The van reversed in panic, but the decoy vehicle blocked its escape. Shouts bounced off concrete. Grace remained half across Luca, breathing through clenched teeth, her blood darkening the sleeve of her driving coat. Luca's hands closed around her waist and shoulder, surprisingly gentle, terrifyingly careful. "Grace," he said, a name raw now. "Look at me." She did not want to look at him. Looking would make the pain real. Instead, she checked the mirrors. "You're alive." Luca's face was inches from hers, his obsidian eyes no longer dismissive, no longer cold, but wide with a kind of controlled horror she had never expected from him. "You were hit. Professional observation. Why did you do that?" Grace gave a breathless, bitter laugh. "Because apparently I fit the part." The words struck him harder than any bullet. Matteo ripped open the rear door and froze at the sight of her collapsed against Luca's chest. "Medic kit," Luca growled, voice turning deadly. "Now." Rafe arrived a second later, pale and shaken. Luca's gaze cut to him like a blade. "You lagged." Rafe opened his mouth. Nothing useful came out. Grace's vision flickered around the edges, but she still heard everything. Luca pressed a folded cloth to her shoulder, his large hands steady despite the fury shaking the rest of him. "Stay awake, bossy passenger," she whispered. His mouth tightened. "You can insult me after the doctor." "I started before the doctor." Matteo appeared with the kit, and Grace caught the flash of guilt in his eyes. She wanted to tell him guilt was wasted fuel. But pain stole the sentence. Luca slid his arm behind her back, holding her with a care that made every guard stare. 5 minutes earlier, she had been the heavy driver no one trusted. Now the garage men formed a wall around her like she was the last royal heir in a burning kingdom. The Safe House Clinic was hidden beneath a shuttered jazz theater in Harlem, a place where red velvet seats collected dust above and surgeons worked beneath reinforced floors. Grace woke on a narrow medical bed under warm lights, her shoulder bandaged, her mouth dry, and Luca Romano seated beside her like a dark statue carved from remorse. He wore no jacket now, only a white shirt with her blood faintly staining one cuff. His sleeves were rolled to his forearms. The Mafia boss looked less untouchable without the suit armor, though no less dangerous. The moment her eyes opened, he leaned forward. "You took a bullet meant for me before your first day ended." Grace blinked slowly. "Does that mean probation is over?" A sound escaped him, almost a laugh, but it broke before becoming one. "Where did you learn to drive like that?" Grace turned her face toward the ceiling. "Defensive courses. Do not reduce what happened tonight to a brochure." His voice had sharpened, but not with cruelty. With fear turned impatient. Grace considered lying. She had built a life from not saying her father's name around men like him. Then she looked at Luca's cuff still marked by her sacrifice and felt old grief push through caution. My father was Michael Bell. Luca went utterly still. The machines hummed around them. Somewhere beyond the wall, muted saxophone music drifted from an old speaker. Michael Bell is dead, Luca said quietly. Yes, Grace replied. I know. I buried him. Matteo, standing near the door, lowered his gaze. Luca's expression changed in layers: disbelief first, then recognition, then something darker. Your father drove for my father. For 17 years, he saved my family during the Quincy Docks attack. Grace's throat tightened, and 3 months later he died in a crash your people called an accident. The safe house air chilled. Luca leaned back slowly. You took this job because of him. I took this job because my mother's mortgage is bleeding us dry, Grace replied. But I applied under Bell because part of me wanted to know whether the Romano family remembered the man who died carrying their secrets. Luca looked wounded, which annoyed her because she was the one with the bandage. I was 16 when he died. I was 15. For a long moment, neither spoke. Grace remembered hospital hallways, her mother's silent, crying men in black suits leaving envelopes that paid bills but never answered questions. Luca remembered a funeral he had not been allowed to attend because his father said drivers were employees and grief was for blood. Shame moved through him like a slow blade. I mocked Michael Bell's daughter, he murmured. Grace's eyes stung, but she refused to give the tears ceremony. You mocked your driver? My father would say that was stupid before he said it was cruel. Luca bowed his head. No performance, no audience. He would be right. The apology sat unspoken but present, heavy as a loaded weapon. Grace closed her eyes. Do not make this sentimental. I am tired. He should have left. Instead, he stayed while the doctor changed her dressing, while Matteo traced the ambush route, while Rafe was dragged into a separate room for questioning. Luca did not touch Grace again without asking, but his attention never moved far from her face. She felt it even half asleep, a dark gravity she did not want and could not ignore. At dawn, Matteo returned with a tablet and grim eyes. The route leak came from inside the convoy team. Luca's gaze did not change. Klaffe. Likely. His account received 2 transfers from a shell company tied to the Varga syndicate. Grace opened her eyes. The second chase car lagged before the sanitation truck moved. Matteo stared at her. Luca did not. He had already learned she noticed what others missed. Rafe was brought in at noon, wrists bound, face bruised from someone else's anger and his own fear. He tried to stand tall until he saw Grace awake. Then his eyes darted away. Luca stood beside her bed, one hand in his pocket, the picture of lethal calm. You laughed when she entered my garage, he murmured. You called her unfit. Rafe swallowed. Boss, I made a mistake. No. Grace made one mistake. Luca's voice dropped into a low, dangerous purr. She took a bullet for a man who had not yet earned her loyalty. Rafe trembled. I never meant for her to get hit. Grace's voice came quiet from the bed. You meant for him to get hit. Do not ask me to admire your aim. The room went silent. Matteo looked briefly pleased. Luca looked at Grace as if she had struck a match inside him. Rafe began confessing in pieces, not from honor but from terror. The Varga syndicate had paid him to delay the chase car, force the lead sedan toward the sanitation trap, and recover Luca's phone after the kill. He had assumed the new driver would panic. He had assumed her size meant slow hands, slow turns, slow thoughts. Grace listened until pity turned cold. Men like Rafe did not simply underestimate women like her. They built entire plans on that underestimation and called themselves strategic. Luca stepped closer to him. You had a diamond behind my wheel and treated her like dead weight. Rafe shook his head. Please. Luca smiled without warmth. I prefer consequences. Consequences arrived before sunset. Rafe's accounts froze first. Then the garage keys disappeared from his ring. Then every Romano soldier learned he had sold the boss's route and failed because the woman he mocked outdrove his betrayal. His fiancée sent back the family ring in a courier envelope. His brother refused his calls. By evening, federal agents raided the shell office used by the Varga syndicate, guided by documents Mateo claimed had arrived anonymously. Grace watched the news from the safe house bed with a blanket over her lap and a scowl on her face. "You move fast," she said. Luca sat beside the Window City light, cutting his profile into shadow. "Men who sell my life do not deserve leisurely endings, and men who insult drivers," he turned to her. "They deserve education." Grace looked away before the softness in his voice could reach her. "Do not act like you are different because guilt made you poetic." Luca accepted the hit without flinching. "Then tell me how to be different." She did not expect that. Men like Luca issued commands, threats, contracts, punishments. They did not ask wounded chauffeurs for instructions. Grace studied him carefully. Without the full armor of arrogance, he still looked dangerous but not simple. There was grief behind his eyes. Old and disciplined. There was pride, too cracked, but not dead. Start by never humiliating an employee to entertain men who already want to feel superior. Luca nodded once. Done. Do not buy my silence with money. Done. And stop calling what I did loyalty. It was my job. No, Luca said quietly. Your job was to drive. You chose to shield me. The truth landed between them, impossible to dismiss. Grace had no answer, because her body had moved before her mind could calculate wages, morality, or revenge. She had seen death aimed at a man who had insulted her, and had still decided he should live. That fact irritated her more than the pain. 2 days later, against medical advice and common sense, Grace insisted on walking into the Romano garage. The space fell silent the moment she stepped from the elevator in a sling black trousers and a deep green blouse that made no apology for her soft, magnificent body. Mechanics froze. Guards straightened. Rafe's empty station looked like a missing tooth. Luca waited near the lead sedan in a bespoke charcoal suit, his face unreadable, his men arranged behind him. Grace thought he had summoned her for paperwork. Instead, he turned to the entire garage. On her first day, Grace Bell noticed a compromised route evaded a staged ambush, saved 3 vehicles from containment, and took a bullet meant for me. His voice carried without effort. Before that, I insulted her. I judged her body instead of her skill. That was not leadership. That was stupidity wearing authority. The silence deepened until even the ventilation seemed to stop. Grace felt heat rise in her cheeks, not shame this time, but something harder to name. Luca looked at her then. I apologize in front of every man who heard me fail. The apology did not erase the bruise of humiliation, but it placed weight on the opposite side of the scale. Grace crossed her arms carefully, protecting her shoulder. Accepted conditionally. A few guards looked horrified. Luca's mouth twitched. Name the condition. You let me redesign the convoy protocol. Mateo almost smiled. Luca did not hesitate. Done. And Rafe's cousin never drives anything larger than a grocery cart for this family. Someone coughed. Luca's eyes warmed with fierce amusement. Also done. The garage exhaled. From that moment, the whispers changed. Grace was no longer the Heavyset hire, the charity case, or the woman who somehow fit behind the wheel. She became the driver who had made the boss apologize on concrete, in front of soldiers. Redesigning the convoy revealed the second secret. Grace found gaps that had not come from laziness alone. Certain vehicle maintenance logs had been altered. A decoy license plate had been duplicated. One garage camera had been looping old footage for weeks. Someone higher than Rafe had been feeding the Vargas family a map of Romano movements, and every clue pointed toward Luca's uncle, Salvatore Romano. The charming elder statesman who kissed babies at fundraisers and smiled at knives from safe distances. Grace brought the evidence to Luca in his office above the club, where rain stroked the windows and jazz hummed beneath the floorboards. He read in silence, each page stripping warmth from his face. My uncle wants the chair, he said. Your chair, Grace asked. Luca looked up. My life first. Salvatore hosted the family's anniversary gala 3 nights later, pretending nothing in the empire had cracked. The ballroom glittered with champagne, gold light, red roses, and women wearing diamonds large enough to fund small hospitals. Grace attended only because Luca insisted protocol required the new convoy architect to observe the inner circle. She wore a midnight blue dress, under a tailored coat, her sling hidden beneath silk, her curves engineered for elegance and power. The room noticed her immediately. Some guests stared with curiosity, some with contempt. Luca entered beside her, and conversation sputtered out. He did not place her behind him. He offered his arm. Grace hesitated only long enough to make him earn the silence, then rested her hand lightly against his sleeve. Salvatore Romano intercepted them near the champagne tower, silver-haired, handsome, and smiling like a saint painted over rot. "Luca," he said warmly, "and this must be the brave driver." His eyes moved over Grace's body with polished cruelty. "I heard she stopped a bullet. Impressive." Though I admit I did not realize the family had begun hiring armored furniture. The insult was softer than Luca's had been wrapped in old-world charm, but it hit the same scar. The nearby guests froze, eager and afraid. Luca's face emptied. Before he could speak, Grace smiled. "Furniture does not usually redesign your security architecture, Mr. Romano." Salvatore's gaze sharpened. No, Grace replied. "But it does notice when old men hide betrayal under good manners." The ballroom went breathless. Luca turned his head slowly toward her, shock and admiration flickering beneath control. Salvatore laughed, but it landed wrong. "A bold woman. A careful one," Grace answered. "Bold would be saying more before dessert." Luca leaned close, his voice meant only for her. "You have evidence here, I have patterns here. Grace, you wanted me to observe the inner circle." Her eyes stayed on Salvatore. "I am observing." For the first time that evening, Salvatore's smile faltered. Matteo approached from behind with a tablet, his expression grim. The duplicated plate had just appeared on a service vehicle in the gala's lower ramp. The real attack was not inside the ballroom. It was beneath it, where Luca's car waited with a false driver and a planted device under the rear axle. Grace moved before permission could become argument. She pushed through the service door, Luca and Matteo following as guards scrambled. The kitchen staff flattened themselves against steel counters as she cut through steam, garlic, and panic. Her shoulder burned, but she ignored it. Down the freight stairs, the garage alarm light blinked amber, exactly like the alley camera had on the night she was shot. The false driver stood by the lead sedan cap, low, one hand inside his coat. Grace grabbed a serving cart and shoved it down the ramp. It smashed into his knees. His weapon clattered across concrete. Luca's men surged past, but Grace was already at the sedan, dropping to one knee despite pain fingers finding the small black box magnetized beneath the chassis. "Do not touch it," Matteo snapped. "I am not caressing it," Grace bit out. She traced the wire path, saw the amateur relay, and understood the arrogance behind it. The device was meant to ignite when the rear door opened, a theatrical killing for a man who enjoyed family audiences. "Remote trigger," she said. "Signal-based." Luca crouched beside her despite Matteo's protest. "Can you stop it? I can stop you from opening the door." Salvatore's voice echoed from the ramp above. "Or you can all stay very still." He stood with two loyal men, a small transmitter in one gloved hand, his ballroom smile finally gone. "Luca, you always did collect strays. This one has caused more trouble than she is worth." Luca rose, slowly placing himself between Salvatore and Grace. "Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me." Salvatore sneered. "You sound like your father when he trusted her father. Michael Bell died holding secrets he should have sold." Grace's blood turned cold. There it was. The truth she had hunted without admitting it. "What did you say?" Salvatore glanced at her. "Your father was loyal to weak men. He discovered my first arrangement with the Vargas and refused payment." "Sure, yes. A little driver, his accident was unfortunate." The garage tilted around Grace. Pain, grief, and rage became one white point. Luca looked murderous. "You killed Michael Bell." Salvatore lifted the transmitter. "And now I will bury his daughter beside another foolish Romano." Grace did not lunge. She drove. Not a car this time, but the room itself. Her eyes found the sprinkler pipe above Salvatore, the leaking oil near his shoes, the loose wheel chock by Luca's foot. "Kick it," she whispered. Luca did not ask what. He trusted her. His shoe sent the chalk skidding through oil, striking Salvatore's ankle. The old man stumbled. Grace grabbed the fallen weapon and fired once into the ceiling pipe, bursting water across the ramp. Salvatore's transmitter sparked in his hand. His loyal men flinched. Romano guards seized them before they recovered. The planted device remained silent under the car. Grace stood soaked beneath artificial rain, shaking with fury, her injured shoulder screaming her father's ghost, finally given a name for its murderer. Salvatore's fall was not dramatic at first. That made it better. He was not shot in a blaze of glory or allowed to make a grand final speech. He was stripped. First, Luca took his ring in front of every captain at the gala, leaving his hand bare and shaking. Then Matteo released the financial trail showing years of payments to Varga accounts. Then came witnesses, men who had feared Salvatore for decades and suddenly discovered courage when Luca's protection shifted toward truth. Bidam. Salvatore's private accounts were frozen. His estate sealed, his allies scattered, and his elegant wife gone to her sister's house with the family jewelry. By noon, federal custody became the safest place left for him. Grace watched the news without blinking. "My father deserved a trial," she said. "Yes," Luca replied. He stood behind her in the club office, close but not touching. "And Salvatore will get one because you stopped me from becoming the punishment myself." Grace turned from the screen. "I did not stop you for him." "I know." His voice roughened. "You stopped me because your father taught you the difference between control and justice." The words hurt because they were almost true. Grace's anger had wanted blood. Her grief had wanted noise. But Michael Bell had raised a driver, not an executioner. He had taught her that survival was not the same as surrender, and that power without brakes eventually killed passengers. Luca looked at her with something deeper than gratitude now. "You saved my life twice." Grace's mouth twisted. "3 times if we count your personality." He laughed, then a real sound, low and startled, and it changed the room. For a moment the Mafia boss disappeared, leaving a man who had almost lost everything because he had mistaken cruelty for strength. "Let me take you to dinner," he said. Grace arched a brow. "I was shot, insulted, used as bait by circumstances and nearly blown up under a ballroom. Your timing is questionable. Then let me apologize with food. You already apologized in a garage. I am willing to become repetitive." She wanted to refuse because wanting felt risky, and Luca Romano was still danger in a tailored suit. Then she remembered the way he had kicked the wheel chock without demanding explanation. Trust had begun there, small and terrifying. "Dinner," she said, "not ownership." The gift arrived that evening in a long black box, delivered by Matteo, with the wary expression of a man carrying explosives. Inside was not a dress, but a deep ruby driving coat, custom cut, reinforced at the shoulder, elegant enough for a queen and practical enough for a woman who preferred exits. A cream card rested on top. "A queen should never be mistaken for cargo. Wear this only if you choose. My driver will collect you at 8 unless you would rather drive yourself." Grace laughed despite herself. At 8, she drove herself. Luca waited on the rooftop terrace of the Aurelia Club, where the city glittered beneath cold stars and heaters, warmed white linen tables set with oysters, saffron risotto, roasted lamb, and dark chocolate torte. When Grace stepped from the elevator in the ruby coat, Luca stood as if struck, not by surprise alone, but by reverence, so open it made the air feel warmer. "You drove," he said. "You offered. I am learning. You are." He pulled out her chair, not like a king granting favor, but like a man practicing respect with both hands visible. During dinner, he asked about Michael Bell, about her mother, about why she had left protective driving after becoming one of the best. Grace told him about grief bills, students who thought a plus-size woman could not teach high-speed control until she made them dizzy on a closed course. Luca listened without interruption. When she finished, he said, "They were fools. So were you." "I was the loudest fool." The final confrontation came with dessert. Matteo brought Salvatore to the terrace, under guard, not broken, but diminished his expensive suit, replaced by plain custody clothes beneath a coat. Luca looked to Grace before speaking. That mattered. Salvatore's eyes found her ruby coat and narrowed with old hatred. You think wearing red makes you powerful? Grace set down her spoon. No. Surviving men like you did that. He swallowed. For the first time, he seemed to understand that she did not need Luca's shadow to stand tall. Your father could have lived if he had looked away, Salvatore muttered. Grace rose slowly. My father died because he knew some roads should never be opened. Her voice stayed calm. You will spend the rest of your life remembering that his daughter closed yours. Salvatore was led away without another word. Grace felt no triumph, only release, clean and quiet like the first breath after a tunnel. Luca remained still until the terrace doors closed. Are you afraid of me, Grace? He asked. The question held no arrogance now, no trap. Just a man standing at the edge of what he wanted to wear. He had no right to demand it. Grace looked at him, at the chiseled jaw, the dark eyes, the hands that had held pressure over her wound, the mouth that had once humiliated her and later apologized where everyone could hear. No, she said, but I am afraid of disappearing inside your world. Luca stepped closer, stopping before the space became pressure. Then I will make room in mine without taking yours. Grace believed him only halfway, which was more than she had expected. I am not yours because I took a bullet for you. No, Luca murmured. You are not mine at all unless you choose to be. The answer reached somewhere, guarded and tired inside her. He lifted one hand, waiting. Grace let him touch her cheek. His palm was warm, slightly rough, careful in a way power rarely was. You are not heavy, Grace Bell, he whispered. You are gravity. You held the road, the room, and my life when every arrogant man around you misread your strength. You are lush, magnificent, and impossible to move unless you decide to move. Her breath caught. That was almost poetic. I had excellent motivation. The kiss came slowly with no command inside it. Luca waited until Grace rose toward him, until her good hand closed around his lapel, until the ruby coat brushed his charcoal suit like flame-meeting shadow. He kissed her, as if asking a question he intended to spend years deserving. Below them, garage doors opened and closed, engines humming through the city's dangerous veins. Grace Bell had entered the Romano world as a heavyset driver, men expected to fail before the first turn. Before her first day was over, she had taken a bullet, exposed a traitor, and forced a Mafia boss to learn respect from behind the wheel. Some loyalty is hired. Hers was chosen. Did you love seeing Grace rise from mocked driver to the woman Luca had to earn? Hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more. Drop a comment below telling us whether Luca deserved her second chance.